Witchcraft is real. No one wants to talk about it. In fact, it's not just something people don't want to talk about. And I'll get into the phenomenology and the phantom experiences that we think are just far too out there in left field, so to speak. Even those terms, left field, baseball, how baseball is segmented, how you're dealing with a pyramid constantly. And when you finally get it, you're taken through a process. And if you follow along with that process and you're doing things like these little baseball players, these little league baseball players, I've been a little league baseball player. I've been a good one, but mostly an awkward kid that didn't really know what the fuck his body was doing, how to move, and then coming into myself and realizing this is how you do it. And then everything in your life is changed around you, and you're put in this power quest of, like, I was humiliated, but they were also some of the best times, right? Where I hit a ball so far out of the park. I was able to exercise for a time and be a really good player. But I was taken through a process where other kids in the family succession of their line or regression would become more selfish, self-indulgent, or stay on a certain path. And I saw the cult, and I was always looking at it going, something else is going on here. Right, something else is going on here. Years later, my coach would talk about me in total disappointment because he felt like I just gave up. He was like, that guy had talent, but he was a loser. And it's like, do you know how painful my shoulder is in my life to this very day? And it was this, like, you can see the difference between my shoulders, right? This shoulder right here, I broke my collarbone like 2 or 3 times. It was like, I was malnourished. My parents would laugh at me when they would watch me play. It was like I didn't have any sort of pride or family support. But when I would go out and I would play with other players, and then I finally got this bonding, they'd be like, you're pretty fucking good. And every time I threw that ball, it would be painful. My rotator cuff was not attached properly, right? And it got in my way of all the physical pursuits that I've ever done. Because your body, later, I would become somewhat of an expert, not from a medical standpoint, but from understanding the biomechanics and the kinesiology behind this, and getting, mid-grade, you could say mid-wit educated, but I would go in depth, and with the information that I had available to me, absorb as much information from these books as I possibly could, to where if you just put me in an average gym, I would excel, and I always did. As far as a trainer goes, is getting the most clients, getting the most effective training done, finding the protocol for particular people, digging in deep, doing research and trying to figure this out, going further than most people would, right? And if you haven't joined the rituals, where I was talking in this last live stream about Zach King, and the fact that he went through this ritual where he had been introduced to sex, he was involved with porn, he was involved with child pornography, he was invited into this entire underground system where he willingly went to these places. And, oddly, sadly, he lost one of his legs. And I do correlate this very closely to my uncles and so forth, because I see how they could have gone off in another direction as well if the father hadn't supplicated. I talked about my German line. I've talked about how I can trace that back to Pfungstadt, Germany, and how many people like Brett Weinstein, you can listen to Cliff High, and how he's regarding this, but that there's an entire 1,000 years that's missing, right? So if I'm able to take and this is from how they're looking at this, if I'm able to take, and I would say that they would even look at what I'm saying here and go, no, this is actually what it is. It would probably be even more revealing, but that if I can take my family line definitively, right, back to the 1400s, in fact, 1400, the unknown Marsteller, Pfungstadt, Germany, the father of Hen Marsteller, H-E-N, which I've looked up before. If I can take this back to the 1400s is really expressing the 400s from their view of these very well-accomplished people, where they say 1,000 years is missing. Why? Why does my family line end at 1400 or 400? If we were to look at it as 400. Why? Isn't that a really pivotal time? Isn't that? So if it were 400 instead of 1400, you can kind of look at it like, okay, those who followed the Catholic Church can stay with that timeline and be considered 400. Those who are the profane, the terrorists, are given another 1,000 years into their timeline. There's going to be a separation, a disparate notion. You're not part of our homogeneous chimera. You're not in the ninth circle sacrificing kids. So this is essentially what Zach King talks about, is you have this seedy underground where these little, he remembers children being abused and raped and killed to the point where it's just heinous. And these adults would drive their cars to this place, do the drugs, go in there and grape the children, and they would still, you gotta, if you can't handle this, then I'm gonna give you the choice to go on to his channel. But even more so, if you wanna look at a very candid interview, because Zach King, he knows it. He's coming to a place where I think he's gone through a process that a lot of people don't look at, and this is where I correlated this to my uncle. Is that a lot of these folks, half Hispanic, partially Hispanic, from the LA basin, San Fernando and Hollywood and all that. That's where my family, came out of or from, and they could have easily been in the lower rungs of that, the more trashy barrios. But my grandfather, like I say, he focused in on what many would consider very temerity-based pursuits. Even if you look, it was Ruben Leon, Leon. He looked much more Spanish. He didn't keep in touch with his family members. He remembers from his earliest memory, he's holding what would be his little sister or brother at this window, and they're expected to take care. And then the kid hiccuped and fell down and died out of the window. The most bizarre shit, right? But the woman who is supposedly his mother was a witch in Santeria. She was known to be a witch, a Santeria witch. So when you put in the fact that, I think he even alluded to and talked about this, and what brought my grandparents together was that the grandmother, may have well come from this Ashkenazi Jewish heritage that goes down to South America. So really interesting mixed family, right? To God, Venezuela, I believe. And she was very light-skinned as well. So these very light-skinned people that were sort of broken off from this family lineage or this patronage, which I think what they're doing is they break off these people to where they mix with indigenous or a collective of a global sort of cosmopolitan settling hothouse where all these rich people place their sort of natives from other places or slaves or just people who are abducted and put them in certain areas, right? And they don't even really remember their family line of how they got to a certain area, right? And then this intermixing. But on my father's side, there wasn't much intermixing, which made me wonder why he even got together with my mother in the first place. But it was this sort of thing where he was a heroin addict. He was extremely rebellious. He tried to erase that history instead of embracing it. And through the process of the occult, which is only occulted to those who aren't going to see it, to others, that's what life is. That's what is the reality of the situation is that you're going to see the process and you'll go through it, and you can see the people who have the houses, who advance, and they supplicate and they sell out, and they're to sell out and sacrifice the people in their own family. And if they don't do that, they lose. They lose what little they have. Like, to show you how close to the hip this is, my son, he wants to break off, and what contest is he led to? He's led to L. Ron Hubbard's contest that he's won 2 awards from. Like, you can't make this shit up. The link with his mother, who is extremely evil and always relished in following this rebellious trail, right? To the point where all she thinks of is money and has money and hoards the money, right? And they come from a mafia background that's linked up with Mario Puzo's Giuliano Picciota, right? Lineage. Like, they are the direct lineage of the Sicilian. You can't make this shit up. So when you look at all that familiar ties and connectivity, it's like, holy fuck. This is an intense and dynamic, codified mimetic sequence, right, of epigenetic information coming from different familiar family lines of memory and the ontological memory, the anthropological memory, right? There's more than one storehouse of information occurring through this computational networking system. This is a very elaborate, detailed, like, your life. When you think about how does this affect me, it's like, it is you. It's forcing you to be a certain person. It's saying, if you really want to enjoy this, you need to see the Hellfire Club dichotomy, sacrifice all these people so that you can enjoy your Christmas and the lights, and you'll feel like you're pure and you're new and you got all this money in your pocket and you're walking through, but you're just posturing yourself. You're just pretending. You're fractionated, right? But you don't pose any threat to what I'm talking about, right? Which is one of us coming into ourselves and seeing how when you're in this, on this planet, when you're in this materium, the supposed materium of a collective effort, whether or not you think you're involved in it or not, when you freak out, when you become angry, when you become impulsive, when you're off track and everybody's saying you're nuts, and it's like, you're the one that's not nuts. You're the one that's going, this is bullshit. You're the one going down those familiar pathways, and you're going, this isn't the town that I'm from. This isn't the identity that I am. This isn't where I come from or what I am, and I refuse to take up arms in your wars and to sacrifice myself again. It's like that, and then they want to argue with you and say, that's not why you did that. You were fearful. You did this. You did that. Because this left-hand path practitionership, bottom line, There's the slaves, there's the goy, and what they want you to do is go, you know that you're different from your family. You know that you're different from the people in your town, right? You know that you're better. And even if you're not, you want to become better. Well, guess what? That makes them food. Food. Do you get it? Why do you think so? Yeah, this is a dawning moment for a lot of people. Because then you see the ritualization with drinking the blood of Christ, right? And the bastardizing, eating the flesh. And you are literally supposed to eat and drink the flesh of your firstborn. This is what Zach King did. And the first people who did this, first person who did this, when you look at Mother Circe, the first witch, this is how she came into being, right? There's this entity that basically says, I have put you in this place, just like the CIA does with all their programs, just like all these programs are tied in together. JJ from Operation OCD, GCD, might as well be though. Underclass podcasts, Picard. Do you think you can't make this shit up? Do you know that Jean-Jacques Picard, that he's not necessarily related to, but how could he not, right? I think the name is slightly different even, but Hergé or Herge, who came out with the Tintin books, created a character where the guy was so massive. So there's Jean-Felix Picard, and then there was a brother. And one of these brothers, they were both big people, but one of these brothers was like towering, huge scientist that looked like a fucking Nord. Hello. Look like these Nords that Jason Rizza-Giorgiani is describing that live in the inner earth. Hello. And the Picards, that is where, partially how, an amalgamation of what Star Trek, Jean Picard? Yeah, it was Jean-Felix Picard. And then there was, this is a huge family line, but it leads into the cockpit that ended up going up into space. And the Picards were the ones who were flying high altitude weather ballooning. And you will not hear that talked about. A lot of the things that I was doing research on in 2010 leading up to 2011, much of that is just not even available on the internet anymore. And the Picards are a huge fundamental family history that follow this whole thing into the Swiss. I haven't read any of Joseph Farrell's books, but I'm going to tell you this is extremely pivotal because this German-Swiss heritage, it's bizarre. And when you take into account that this happened around the same time that Konrad Zuse and Alan Turing, right, were going through all this shit, and how fundamental Charles Darwin Galton was, and how he really was the leader. And then you look at Margaret Sanger, right? You look at the eugenics movement. You look at the IQ tests, right? This was all stuff that I was looking into many years ago. And now we've come to another layer where people have to reflect back at those times and remember how they came into the process or uncovering the process of these multi layers of abortions, the factory of nobody's dying around us. When I was doing rideshare, I would take these women that were going to get abortions or just had an abortion, and there'd be picketers outside, and it would be like, how could I not take a side? How hypocritical am I? And I'm having to survive. And so I was like, I'm not taking any more rides doing this. And then I would get sucked in, and suddenly I realized this person is like, oh, I'm waiting outside. I'm over here, right? There's this factory of sacrifices happening. And so when you get into the occult rituals, is that when people are sacrificing their firstborn, and that is the firstborn with the same father, the same patronage. So what this strange energy is going to do, and what all these weird occulted meditations that they're going through, the process that they're going through, is that they want to bring you back together with the person, the male back together with the female, even after the abortion. And then that is when the shit happens. That's what my ex-wife did. She and my mother had multiple abortions. multiple abortions. And you see their lives, they're given money. They went through the process. And at some point, when they're on the bathroom floor crying and being crazy and freaking out, right? And kicking their legs, an entity comes to them and they talk about being spoken to, and they take on Lucifer, or is it Lucifina? Or is it hell, H-E-L, spelled with one L? Or is it Mother Circe? Or is it Satana that Jason Reza Georgiani talks about? Sorry, Jason Reza Georgiani. I wasn't going to say Jordan Peterson, dude. Okay. So you watch this happen with diet, this healthy expression of diet. So look at Michaela Peterson, look at Jordan Peterson. This may seem off topic, but it's never off topic. Look at how he was to be this shining light in his recognition, in his fame, even though he lost credibility on one side, right? Even though the medical community was pushing him away, he was talking on a very highly ontological level about a certain caste and character and being able to go into depth. I know a lot of people protest to this, but just hang in there with me. He was making a lot of sense. There's this point where it's like, are you a put on or aren't you? Look at the diet he was on. Eating meat. How can you proselytize and posture yourself as a purist, right? As a Puritan, really. And to say, because, I mean, he started to really look into religion more and talk about religion to the point where people are programmed to say that's pietous. And it's like, do you not know that you just complimented me by saying that's pietous? Do you understand what piety is? Like, you're saying that's false piety. And then you would have to be above Jordan Peterson. And that's the thing, is that Jason Georgiani hasn't risen above because he's culturally sunk into, sorry, Jason, but it's true. He's culturally sunk into Iran and all of the dogma and presuppositions of what he's been taught culturally. And it doesn't exist. It's an aphorism. That's the whole point to this talk, is that when people follow an application that's based on an alma mater, I guarantee you're going to be surprised, Jason, when you're led back to the fact that how the fuck could this be? How could I be part of this Sarmatian influence that really broke off into the O-fights and just went under a different moniker, and everything led back into ancient Babylon, and then might as well have been an O-fight, right? And of course, you're refuting. That's crazy how that tastes like milk. Yeah, I'm drinking more minerals, and the magnesium and the boron together, like a cup of water, tastes just like milk. That's milk. You wonder how much protein's even in milk, right? But they're not going to bother giving you high quality minerals like that. And I just felt this boom because I have all the minerals that I need. And even me, like, I'm the hypocrite talking about it, but I'm not a hypocrite if I am talking about it. I am going to be eating animal meat. I'm ordering animal meat. I'm able to build my body up through carnivore. I'm able to lose body fat. I'm able to have all the energy I need, but mostly I'm able to have the nutrients. And so when you look at this whole thing, like with Jason Reza Georgiani and the culture, and really what's made him age and broken him down, look at your diet, my man. Look at your diet. Look how deep the patronage, the lineage is in the scope of how you see things. Now, again, I highly respect Jason. He brings up amazing topics that are point on for this time, right? Right on. Good job. But his areas of speculation are driven by something that's based on a fallacy that was sold to him, just like the rest of us. And you're going to have to admit, you live in the shit heap with everybody, Jason. You live in the shit heap with everyone. Everyone. We all live in the same confusing shit heap together. That's what everyone wants to deny. So there's this entity that wants to posit and posture itself as, I am your family. I am your patronage. I am your lineage. I've done this all for you to bring you back home. It's like, no, you didn't. You murdered me over and over again, lifetime after lifetime. You murdered my children. You caused me to murder my children and consign them off to war and other heinous, atrocious activities that were blending into your, and at the end of it all, it's like, well, I was just saying fuck you to God. And it's like, you're a spoiled motherfucker who sacrificed everyone around you. And so this line of Cain is he's still alive, right? Like isn't this the most bizarre aspect to the Bible? You murdered the one who God favored because that was a pure son who was following, I'm not killing anything, I'm following the sprouting of this grain, and we're going to live in this agrarian sort of lifestyle, egalitarian lifestyle, right? And this brings about a whole different human to the process of ingestion and eating. So here we are, purists eating meat. So that's the breakdown of Jordan Peterson's life and his daughter. And here I am, eating beef liver, functioning off beef liver, saying this is all that a poor ass motherfucker can afford. And beef liver is so affordable that, again, I've got an entire month's worth or more of beef liver. This beef liver is only $3, not even $3, for an entire week's worth to get almost all the nutrients that are missing in your diet. All the things that were missing that would have changed my life. If I started eating this 30 years ago, I would have had a completely different life. So what was I to do, right? Even 25 years ago, when this would have made a huge difference in my life, my kid's life, like it's this serious, I didn't even realize what I was doing. I didn't know the significance of it. I was doing my own research from a completely different area and ended up eating dehydrated beef liver, which is really, and not even knowing that I was doing it, they called it bovine serum. It was just a fancy name. It wasn't the bovine serum that you're going to see online today. But it was exactly like beef liver tabs, and that's what it was. So, and I would overdo it on it. I saw and felt instant, and I'm going, where's this from? Well, how am I getting this energy from it? It was the missing ingredient. Suddenly I'm 178, 182, 83 pounds, squatting 450 pounds on my back for 25, 30 reps alone in my house. Putting on with belts and everything, all I could do is put on like 335 pounds and just really repping it just like this to the point where I would get up to 5 or 6 reps and I'd be like, this isn't natural. I have to put this weight back on. This isn't natural. To the point where I was afraid of going through the floorboard, right? So I'm going to say that I found a combination 25 years ago when I was even filming myself, and I threw away the film and I should have hung on to it. It's the kind of film that would have made me, it would have given my kids and myself provisions today. So much self-sabotaging that was brought about through the machinations of an unseen force that didn't support me. That if something were to come and say, look, hang on to this is this important, right? But it doesn't. It says you're just going to be a candle dangling in the wind. So that's how important the training is to me. But I'm not trying to get something back that was lost and burned. I built that energy up and it's mine, right? It's the proclamation, the proclaiming of something that you did, which would have invariably, undeniably brought you notoriety and wealth, right? From hard won, and I did everything right, but at the end, erasing myself, erasing the false, like even that is a noble thing to do, right? And if one has done this, then everything beneath it, right? Beneath this one, beneath the notion, the principles, dissolves and falls apart. And then they go, how important do you think you are? I'm just trying to be myself, my true self, and you're living in denial, right? So when you put this all together and you have a mediating agent that will free up testosterone in your body, something as simple as the original tribulus, the Tribex, that's just got this powerful formula. And when you put this all together, it's like, boom, it just pops. And when that works, you go, I don't know what's making it work, but I'm sticking to this. I did that for as long as I could. And around that same time, people are sensing your strength. They're sensing your power. They're sensing that you see through them and you see their weakness and their frailty. And they're like, oh, I'm linked up with this. And then the voice comes to them and it talks to them while they're kicking and screaming their legs, acting like they're being abused, when the only abuse that's happening is you're not getting your way because you're not as beautiful as you think you are. In fact, you're ugly. You're not intelligent. You're just self-willed. And you're not an individual thinking about thoughts that are completely creative and self-expression. You are receiving downloads and you're communicating those downloads with everything you do. You work for the other side. I even got to the point where I'm looking at it going, everybody is going to think that I'm on steroids. But now it's like, no, they wouldn't. Like, there are people in their 30s, which is like the peak time. When you're hitting your mid-30s, your early 30s, your mid-30s, you're hitting peak times where you may never have that time again. And I'm right around 31, 32. I came from a very dark, it's always like that. It's like you come from this dark, destitute time to come into this time where you're like, you come into a time, and I bought the cheap shit. I bought what was available to me. I used the tools. I did the sweat. I did the hard-won way. I'm doing it right now. This isn't just some bullshit, right? And so I think that's the importance of documenting and just showing where my mind's at. But you get to a place where you put yourself in such self-abuse that you start to self-annihilate, right? And what the other side, the left-hand path, is saying is, don't do that. Are you going to kill yourself or are you going to kill someone else? Honestly, you're you. What's more important? To self-sacrifice and die? This is what the right-hand path's trying to tell you, that you should die. And if we knew more about reincarnation, we may realize that that is how you become more, and that is how you solidify the harmony in the harmonics of purity, how you bring about the principles. That what we're experiencing really collectively is that the world as a representation or as an idea and the social contracts that come out of that are in fact following a left-hand path, and that if you want to move your way forward in the supposition of this falsified world, you're going to become a practitioner, and this is how. And then in droves, people are coming to it, and it matters the quality of who these people are, because ultimately their capacity and their capability and what their ability, the highest tier of achievability is already known through, then that's what these mimetic sequences are all about. It's already pre-written, it's already preordained, but there is a bifurcation right? Where you're either going right or left. It's the same story. It's Sith and the Jedi, and right? So when you're trying to do this at an ever advancing age on a shoestring with the minimal, so I mean, you could go through the process and then you realize, how is it that I get to this place over and over again? I achieve this higher tier or this higher status of being and becoming. I'm as balanced as I possibly could be. I'm at the height of my self-expression, and then something is able to tear me down again, right? To where it's trying to wipe me out, my family lineage, and the fact that I ever even did it. And so it gets kind of into this, not kind of, but it gets directly into this Lamb's Book of Life, or this computational system, where there's a bifurcation. You could say that there's a very dark union occurring, or a dark aspect of a homogeneous computational system. Like, so if Conrad Zuse and Alan Turing were seeing something that was positive at all in the computational, the postulation of a computational system, this sort of Jacobo-Grinberg presupposition that really led into witchcraft, and then led into the fact that the sons that are the closest to this witchcraft mother, this Satana, this hell, this Lilith, this disgusting, ugly witch, this hag, this Morai, three witches, Clotho. Like the fact that they associate Clotho and anti-aging, right, with this at all, that's pretty weird, isn't it? The zeitgeist, the zeitgebers, the timekeepers, the bioluminescence, how we use aromatic amino acids, how we get into the building blocks, how when you represent this structure, right, that you have to be put through this trial by fire, but you're going through a superior trial by fire, and they've been lighting you on fire and igniting your entire life the entire time, and they didn't even have the power to do that, and you're scratching your head wondering, how are all these low-level demons able to have access to my life? And then what the popular notion is you gave them access to your life. And then you say, no, I didn't. And it's like, yeah, you did. And then what were you doing? And when you go through the process of being good, being God, you're like, yeah, but you were being good, you were being God, but you're out here with all these other mofos. You're put through the same process, and you're not protected at all. And then this is what causes people to refute the notion of God, right? That purity would exist and would be the fundamental aspect of existence. If you didn't eat food that was purified, you could say homogenized if you want to, or pasteurized, however you want to put it, right? But if you ate food that was cultured, but it was packaged up and it lost its shelf life, right? Or even rice, you take off the husk to the rice and then you don't treat it and it's not packaged in a certain way, it's going to go bad. We're constantly eating the processed, denatured version of a food because this is how en masse, how we operate. Right? And this is why it's so crucial and fundamental when you're talking about a diet. But even more so, how crucial and fundamental it is that you stick to certain bullet points, so to speak, but quite literally, right? Those foods that are going to give you, like beef liver, that give you all the nutrients that are required in order for you to grow and prosper. And if you try to find this or buy these foods with a benefits card or with limited money, which I've done, and I've even bought, for my son, spent my last dollars on the belief that this nutrition was going to get to him and he would be using it. And to be just told lies. Like, how can you just lie about something? And then it comes back to you and it's like, well, didn't you lie? And it's like, wow, but I was made to lie. Well, you can't be made to lie. You're either on one side or the other. And it's like, yeah, but I live in a fallen world that's forcing me to lie to the point where you can't even get a job a house, anything without lying. And when people try to come off like they're purists, they did. They supplicated, they broke off, they lied. So that's what I was talking about earlier, is like I feel this pulling toward, at least in this timeline, and this is where they try to trap you in, Pennsylvania. So when spirits leave the body and then they remember these things, they're attracted toward a different timeline, thrown into this loop, and then they emerge in the butthole of the universe to where they're born into a shithole, right? Because the time sequence is all off. And people wonder, how the fuck did I get here? How did I get in this body? How did I get in this family? People en masse are talking about this. Right? Everyone. People you never thought would question it. And this does it, I'm telling you. The more solid I get, the stronger I get, the fattier I appear, because I'm actually building my chest up while the fat is protruding out, right? So it's like there's tons of muscle there and then the fat's protruding out. So I'm burning the fat as I'm building up the muscle, and then what's happening is it's looking like I'm just straight up fat, where I'm actually in really good shape right now. So you can't, and that comes from something that I was messing with, where I was actually trying to hurt myself, and then I did it again later, which is, there was this stuff called M1T, right? And it's like this synthetic methylated version of testosterone that may or may not even be legal or illegal. It's probably put on a completely scheduled class. And for the longest time, it was considered, it was the cheapest shit, so-called steroid, but it's not, doesn't even work as your typical steroid, and it leads into all these synthetic hybrid, really, when you get into the practical application, if there is any practicum to it, like it was considered rat poison by the bodybuilding community. It really renders almost no positive results, but it really depends on what you're eating. But this stuff was killing me. I didn't even need to take it, but I forced myself to take it anyway. And I swear my heart almost did stop in my chest. And I kept pushing myself through this and forcing myself to do it. And I've done a lot of things that are just really radical and crazy. And once you mess with your hormones like that, you're messing with the very fabric of who you are. And there's either an affirmation or a disassociation, I suppose, in a way, even though I was intellectually cued in. The people that you're around, the situation that you're in, you would take completely different steps if you weren't self-deprecating and thereby self-sacrificing yourself for other people. And you're on a path that very few people can even understand. And even more so, the weakest people around you are imbued with information and energy, and they feel it, and they look at you, and they're like, I'm going to take power over you. I have it. And they know they don't have any power over you, and that you could bitch slap them across a room, right? But they follow the voice. They follow the process. There is no union. There is no grace with these people. They're the ones that are involved with and short-sighted and will not see what's really happening. They're the people who are working for government. They're people who act like and posture themselves as good Christians. And the entire thing about the theology of Christianity is that it is a cult. It is a cult that is sacrificing the pure Son. Everything that they do is a sacrifice of you, because if you are trying, and this gets into the delineation, the non-delineation, where it's like, well, how can a female be a pure son? It's like, what process does this so-called female follow? Right? And it's like, well, this person doesn't really regard themselves as male or female. They're living a life that is based on purity, purification, fasting, exercise, And when you put it all together, and then the following of principles, and it's like, well, that's what a son is. It doesn't matter what body you're put in. And this is existentially what creates so much hardship and problems, is like, you're saying, like from the Gospel of Mary, you're saying that a lowly female could do this. It's like, I'm not saying that the body or the physical body is capable of anything. If you want to get into these cultural wars or xenophobic, misogynistic type claims, I'm not even going there. I could give a fuck about your anything, any of the illusions that you cast. I'm not even looking at that. What I'm saying is when you are aligned with pure principle, you will forget about the false presupposition of this is what you are. And you don't even need to get to the point where you're looking in a mirror going, this is false, this is false. You're going in the wrong direction. The existential world, you're never going to see. It's going to lead you into this rhetorical loop of lies and deceit, and you're never going to find your way in this world. And that's why they built in that it's fundamental that you are brought to this chopping block. That if you are this amalgamation of energy, and you made it through, past the child sacrifices, past all the others, right? And you somehow made it through, and you built yourself up into this, well, they're going to hang you on a cross and have a big feasting day where they sacrifice you, right? So you get into the aspects of God and the direction of where energy is supposed to go. And this does lead to Jason Reza Giorgiani's assertions with Zoroastrianism, young Sadi, right? And the timeline that he alludes to. But I would conjecture as to say that when you're talking about this abstract, which is the only way it can be described, and you say, maybe the Zoroaster actually lived thousands of years ago, maybe it was just 500 or 600 BC, or 400 to 600 BC, like Jason is alluding to. It's like, how can you delineate and identify an individual? Maybe the energy itself was the connectivity. And this is the thing, is that my namesake is keeper of the stables. That is the occupation that the Zarathustra, young Sadi, that was his occupation that his father taught him. He was a noble keeper of the horse stables. It's a family line. It's so occulted and so obscured, but they know exactly what that family line is. And they want to see, in fact, the entire world is watching and sabotaging. And there's been many sabotaging efforts that disqualify the CIA, the MSS, the Mossad, all the people that are involved with this, where they shouldn't even be alive. It's based on the presupposition of devaluing, denaturing, impurifying, and going to utter depths of depravity, right? To make sure that the purity doesn't exist, that it doesn't instantiate itself into the fabric of space-time and time-space and re-identify, re-qualify, reassert the mimetic code. It should have happened already. There's no reason why it shouldn't have. So it really does get into the areas of self-sacrifice, and it's like, I don't sacrifice myself for any of you mofos. You are not worthy. And that's when the separation takes place. Like, you came to the hub. You came to the center. You had one toe on one side, one in the nice warm water. You have the right toe on the right side, and then you felt the chill. I felt the chill. You felt the depths and the depravity of the left-hand path. You felt how, when you think about fire and ice, you know, that idea of perfection and the idea and the ideology of purity, being the warmth, be the high, absolute hot, being the Kelvin heat, taking it to the extreme measure. On the left-hand side, being the perfection, being the thermodynamic, perfect crystalline structure. that the Calvin would absorb and melt away all ideas of perfection. Okay, that's my son. I gotta go.